Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
So, welcome to the show. Today's Tuesday. This is going out live on Mintwave Radio. You can simply ask Alexa if you have enabled the skill for Mintwave Radio first. If it's via podcast, go to the website above, mintwave-radio.com. You can see the schedule for the week for all the podcasts that are in our network, not just mine. Feel free to download the app for Apple and Android and subscribe to any that take your fancy. Now, today's episode is 167, and today we have Diane Dreher, who is an author and a positive psychology coach. And we're going to be talking about finding a peace in a challenging world. Now, I'm your host, Karen Roberts, helping coaches and therapists to get their message heard to the people who need to hear it. Now, Diane Dreher, PhD, is a best-selling author, researcher, and positive psychology coach. She has a PhD in Renaissance literature from UCLA, a master's degree in counseling, and professional certified coaching credential from the International Coaching Federation. Her books, The Tao of Inner Peace, The Tao of Personal Leadership, The Tao of Womanhood, Inner Gardening, and Your Personal Renaissance have been translated into 10 languages. And our work has been featured in media outlets, including USA Today, Entrepreneur, Redbook, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Science of Mind, radio and TV, talk shows, podcasts, webinars, and websites on leadership and personal growth. So that is a pretty impressive resume there, Diane. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today.
So with everything that you do, would you like to first of all just share with the audience a little bit about your backstory there? What made you make the decisions to go and get all these amazing credentials and take this path?
Probably a number of things. My father was in the Air Force, and so when I was growing up, we moved all the time. So I got to explore the world. And when I was 10 years old, I became fascinated with the wisdom of the East. We'd lived in the United States, continental United States, the Midwest, the West Coast. And all of a sudden, I found myself in the Philippine Islands and Clark Air Force Base, where mango and papaya trees grew in our yard, and our windows were made out of seashells. Imagine that. Okay. And my father brought back all this art from Tokyo, from Taiwan, Chinese art, Japanese art, which had this incredible beauty to it because they don't fill up the whole screen with drawings, paintings, whatever. There's this sense of empty space, or yohaku, the Japanese term, which is a balance of yin with the yang of what is actively presently there. So I tried to do Chinese brush painting, and I tried to do Chinese calligraphy as a 10-year-old, and wanted to learn more and more about this different way of seeing the world. Because in the West, we're very yang. The Tao talks about yin and yang, the two polarities of existence, the dark and the light, action and contemplation. In the West, we're very yang, very action-oriented. We pack our days with activities, and that's made us very productive in many ways. But it's also created a lot of stress for a lot of people because we don't know how to take yin, time to walk around in nature, time to take a deep breath between activities, time to meditate, time to listen to our hearts, our bodies, and our souls. So to combine yin and yang, I started meditating when I was in college, and in earnest, since I could think about these things more as a college student than a 10-year-old, I started studying Eastern philosophy and reading the Tao Te Ching and realizing that we are more creative when we're in touch with our hearts, when we give ourselves yin time. We can be productive and do a lot of things very mindlessly in many cases when we're not in balance. So what I love about the Tao Te Ching is the overarching lesson of balance, which I think we all need and which has been my mainstay. So I'll do a lot of action, but I listen to my intuition, my heart, my inner guidance to help me navigate to the next level, to have mindful instead of mindless action. And I'm only human, so I sometimes get totally distracted and then have to go back and say, what's going on here? I'm feeling stressed. I need yin time.
I think that what you just said there, that is massive because, yeah, like you say, we are living in a very action-oriented world. And many can actually have feelings of guilt if they are having some yin time, taking some personal time out for self-care or to just simply be, which then completely ruins the whole point of having that time out if they're feeling guilty about doing it. And what you said about space, yes, I suppose I've never really looked at it like that before, because we would want to fill a painting up with things and objects, and actually it's the space that's in a room that makes a room. It's not the things that are in it. But why is it that we in the West have been so focused on the things rather than appreciating or even being aware of the space?
That's an excellent question. If you look at East and West in terms of the globe, there's a lot more meditation that goes on in Asia, in India, in the East than in Western Europe and the continental United States and Canada for that matter. Why is that? It's deeply embedded in the culture and it just reinforces itself. I remember when I was a child, I used to love to climb trees because my parents couldn't reach me up there. And I could be there looking out at the world and up at the sky and just being one with nature in the tree and wouldn't be called down to do my chores. Again, the Air Force, the military is very yang, okay? And my mother was very yang. So when she would see me reading a book, she'd say, "You're not doing anything important. Why don't you go dust and vacuum the living room?" This was not very helpful. So I would climb trees and get above it all, literally, or go hide so that I could have yin time because I need it. And I think we all need it, but we get called lazy when we're taking our yin time. You're just sitting there doing nothing.
Absolutely. But in the doing nothing, you're actually doing a lot of good, So what would you say? This is, Eastern, all this Eastern philosophy obviously is thousands of years old. You mentioned there the Tao Te Ching, which I don't personally know anything about, but I know it was written thousands of years ago. But so what can it offer us today in this world, in the society that we're living in?
Okay, the Tao Te Ching was written over 25 centuries ago by a Chinese wise person named Lao Tzu. And it was written during something called the Warring States period in ancient China, when there was a lot of commotion, upheaval, and life as he had known was changing dramatically. So I think that our time is also a time of upheaval, of tremendous change and challenge. So Confucius, who was a contemporary of Lao Tzu, said, the way to find greater order is to obey and honor your family, and that there are all kinds of social traditions, to follow. Lao Tzu, on the other hand, went out walking in nature and found renewed hope and peace of mind by connecting with the lessons in a mountain stream, a grove of bamboo, or the changing seasons. So that nature offers us lessons, inspiration, and hope. A mountain stream, he wrote about the power of water, which is gentle and nurturing, and yet with perseverance can cut through solid rock. For example, the Grand Canyon carved by the Colorado River. Okay. It takes time, however, and patience and perseverance. So that lesson is something that we can learn from the Tao and from nature instead of expecting something to happen instantly. I used to laugh at myself because I would be impatient waiting for a baked potato to cook in the microwave oven. Oh, it's taking so long, whereas it would take an hour to cook in a regular oven. Okay, bamboo, another lesson of the Tao, that there are many ways of being strong. And we in the West see pretty limited ways of being strong, being tough and standing our ground, as it were. Bamboo is strong because it bends with the wind so it doesn't break. A lot of our trees have fallen down in the wind out here in Northern California with all the storms because they could not bend. Whereas if you have flexibility, that's a strength that we can learn to be flexible. And finally, the changing seasons. There are 4 seasons, and in most places, even in Northern California where I live. And there are times of new beginnings: spring, summer, fall, harvest, recognize the fruits of our labors. And then there's winter, which is a time of contemplation, reflection. And even in California, you cannot plant tomatoes in the wintertime. It just doesn't work, okay? So that recognize that we, like nature, have our own cycles and to be patient with them. Sometimes we get all excited being yang, getting things done, but it's important to take, after the time of activity, to just take some time to reflect on what we've learned from the process and how we can move forward. There's a story which I find very interesting. After World War II, there was a leadership practitioner, W. Edwards Deming, who had this idea of total quality management, that you make a plan and then you execute the plan, you accomplish your objective. And then you stop and ask, what can we learn from this? How can we do it better next time? And that is a quality cycle. So the next time you have a new beginning, start the project, get into it, and then finish it, to pause and ask, what have we learned from this cycle? How can we do it better next time? So we went to the Detroit automobile manufacturers and proposed this cycle, and they said, why? We don't need to do that. We just put new fins on the cars and all the same engine and, churn them out the next year. This would slow us down. So he took his theory to Japan, and they started using it, and they came up with cars that had better mileage, that were constantly improving with this cycle of total quality management because of this time of reflecting. So as human beings, we can take yin time as a resource. And a lot of people have lately. There's this great resignation because during COVID, people had to work remotely or got laid off or their lives changed dramatically. And we couldn't do a lot of the things we had gotten used to doing. So we had all this yin time. We were, as one of my friends called it, under house arrest, just home all the time. And climbing the walls, being frustrated. A lot of people started taking walks outside because they couldn't do much else. So unbeknownst to them, they were practicing yin time and they were getting back in touch with nature. And what happened was that they started reflecting on their lives, thinking, I don't want to do this same job for the next decades of my life. I think that there's something else calling to me. So they quit. And we have all this change happening because people have been reflecting and asking the questions.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, when you're in the rat race, they don't have time to stop and reflect because it's just get home and go to sleep. Yes, I didn't put the two together. I knew lots of things were changing, but hadn't thought of that was the reason why. Yes, it's time to reflect and time to realize that, maybe all that doing, and actually I quite like being at home and having more time with my family or having more time, although it worked the other way as well. I was about climbing the walls personally, but definitely I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for the lockdown. So in a weird twist of it, it's almost if that awful thing hadn't happened, I wouldn't be doing this, because it made me reflect. And this whole show really came out from it. So it's interesting, isn't it, that, yeah, when you actually take time and to listen, like you said, go within and listen to your intuitive voice that knows what is best for you. It only knows the good. And it was once I started listening to that. And I suppose that the word that comes to mind when you're talking about that is actually my favorite word, Kaizen, just constantly improving. You don't have to have all the answers. I certainly don't. I still don't. Obviously, I didn't have the answers when I started this whole show. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. It's been a learning process. And like you say, as long as you just keep looking at it and reevaluating it and tweaking it, because this is what holds so many people back, doesn't it? Because they're waiting for it to be perfect.
Yeah, and they're waiting for security and certainty. And there's no security and certainty in the creative process. A Xerox or a photocopying machine will just make copies of what already was, which is what happens when we're stuck in a secure, predictable situation. But creativity is dealing with the unknown. It's part of an ongoing process of renewal and growth, which is frightening to some people. Some people don't like change. They don't like uncertainty. So the Tao also tells us that we don't need to jump into a completely new possibility. People don't run marathons, just get up one morning and run 26 plus miles. That just doesn't work. You have to train for it and work up to it and gradually increase your distance and your stamina. The Tao says that a building over 9 stories high begins with a handful of earth. A tree that larger than your embrace starts with a single seed. And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that one step leads to another. It's a treasure hunt. We take a step, we discover something new, we learn from that, and we take the next step. So it requires faith in the process, which being out in nature helps me recognize. And it also helps me recognize that we each have unique talents. There's never been anyone exactly like you. No one in the world in all known history has had the same fingerprints. We are unique parts of the greater whole. And like the plants in my garden, we're all different, and our differences, our diversity, we're all part of the pattern, and we're called by our hearts and souls to come forward, to bring forward our own unique contribution, as you're doing, which no one has done exactly the same way you're doing it. And we need it. And there's a sense of joy in doing that. And also a sense of joy in seeing other people having the courage to reach out and become who they truly are.
And that's it, isn't it? Is all you got to do is show up. It's funny, isn't it? Look, I can have a real tendency to overcomplicate things, and I overcomplicate it, and then I have to take a step back and simplify every single time. And you look in nature, and nothing's resisting growth, are they? They're not forcing, or maybe some ivy or some of the weeds might look like they're trying to force things. Everything in nature, joking aside, everything in nature it doesn't fight to survive, does it? It's all effortless, and it all has its different time frames. And yeah, we live in this, I want it now. And we forget that there are, like you said, the seasons. Love that. Yeah, there's a season. There's a season for sowing. There's a season for reaping. So you can't have it now, even though we've got Deliveroo and Justies that can deliver our food now, which is the worst thing that ever should have been able to be invented, I think, because we're so impatient now, aren't we?
We're reinforced by our culture for wanting instant gratification, which kind of reduces us to the emotional level of a 2-year-old. I want it now.
True. Very true. Very true. Okay, now I'm starting to. So I'd never heard this book, but Lao Tzu, yes, okay, I've seen many quotes. So this all comes, I didn't realize that all this comes from these books.
Yeah, this book is 81 little poems that Lao Tzu wrote many years ago, obviously, by observing the wisdom of nature, by seeing yin and yang and how they work together. And another issue that in the West, we tend to see either or, all or nothing, win or lose. Okay. So this is really sad because it reduces all of the multiple possibilities of life to only 2 alternatives. It's either all or nothing, win or lose. And the Tao says, no, the Tao is one, and from one come yin and yang, sunlight and shadow, the forms of all creation. So that yin and yang working together are part of the creative process. What happens with a lot of people is they'll be working on something and they come to an impasse and they can't see the next step, the next solution. Impatiently, they'll push through and just finish it, and it's not the best, but they just want to get it done. Or with the wisdom of Tao, they'll say, okay, I need to take a break. My colleague, Shu Park Chan, who was the chair of the engineering department at Santa Clara University for many years, would be working on an engineering problem. And he'd come to a point of diminishing returns. He would be stuck. So he'd go and do Chinese brush painting, which was beautiful. And then he'd come back, and guess what? He could see the next step because he had taken a creative yin break. A lot of people will sleep on it if they can't think of something, and then they wake up the next morning with the next step, with the solution. So to use yin and yang as part of a larger process of creativity is wonderful. And to use yin and yang as part of a process of conflict resolution is something that we on this planet need to learn more of before we destroy the life on this planet. That it's not all or nothing. It's not right or wrong. It's both
everything
and.
in between.
Yeah,
everything in between. Yeah, I wonder why we have become so detached here in the West. And I'm sure for a lot of people still in the East, not everybody is still reading these old texts. They've unfortunately become westernized.
Yes, that's true.
So they too might be starting to become more detached. I have found that through, I call it my practicing being. I'm just, because, obviously I can talk a lot. You've not noticed, have you? I can talk a lot, always have done. And so it was actually when I verbally and mentally, like if you're in the shower, that's when you have your aha moment. So
yeah.
It makes sense that we have to find a way to, I call it dancing in between. There's times of unthinking. There's times of thinking is a tool to be used, and then the doing. But coming back to I love that. We need to find balance again, don't we?
Yeah, and there are a couple of reasons why I think we get so yang, so limited, is that stress, chronic stress, puts us into a defensive posture, right? Fight or flight or freeze. So we only have a couple of ways of reacting. If we're being chased by a tiger, or we need to jump out of the way of a car when we're in the crosswalk, that saves our life. We need to act quickly. We need to react. And we don't sit there thinking, oh, isn't that a beautiful animal that is trying to eat me? Or, oh, what kind of car is coming at me? Is it a Tesla? Oh, how delightful. It's good for the environment. No, you jump out of the way. You don't think, you don't reflect, you don't see all the possibilities because it's a survival mechanism. So when we're under chronic stress, our higher brain centers shut down temporarily, and we don't think creatively. We don't reflect. We don't listen to our intuition. All we do is jump out of the way to save our lives, right? So when we're really yang, busy, busy, busy all the time, what does that do to us? I think it puts us into a state of chronic stress where we become very narrowly focused, very reactive, and defensive. We see someone who looks different and all of a sudden react with fear instead of saying, oh, that's interesting. Where is this person from?
Yeah, we've stopped being curious, haven't we? And go straight into judgment.
Yes, because judgment saves our lives when we're threatened, when we're in survival mode. But we're not always in survival mode.
There are no saber-toothed tigers, are there?
Not in my neighborhood. No.
Not me. Haven't seen one round here.
And so what can we learn by being curious, which is what the Tao inspires us to do, to look at nature, to look around us, to look within us, and to ask questions. What's this telling me? What can I learn from this? And to pause and take a deep breath before we act so that we don't just mindlessly react. It
takes practice.
Yeah. And it takes being aware. The Tao has, again, two polarities, awareness and action. If we are acting without being aware of what we're doing, we're not acting very wisely. And if we're simply sitting and being aware all the time and not acting, well, nothing gets done. So we need both.
And there's the thing, isn't there? That there, I think, where and I get it, the self-development or sort of arena has really sprung up from all this when they started talking about the law of attraction and your thoughts become things or your thoughts manifest. And I feel that many misinterpreted that as though all I've got to do is sit here and ask the universe for this thing and it's going to come to me. And yet, like you've just said there's two parts to this. We're not saying no action. We're saying take the action when you have had that period of no thinking, practicing being, just being still, and then go and do. And I really think that so many people they've just misinterpreted, as I did. I admit, I thought it was all about my thoughts. I've got to control my thoughts somehow. And it's thoughts. Yeah, my thoughts will turn into things. And I missed the point. So it's not that it was written wrong. It was my personal interpretation of it. And actually, it's the actual unthinking was just as important as the thinking. Again, it's all this sort of ego. We have been brought up that we have got to do so much. So the ego mind needs to take over. I've got to remember, I've got to think about this. And then I've got to plan this. And then I've got to, this exhausting because you're not balancing it out with the yin. And it's, I've not mastered it. I've only just sussed it, I would say, in the last year. I think, oh my goodness, I've been getting it all wrong.
Yeah, it's because partly it's because of our culture. We figure, okay, I just need to do something, boom, and I'll get what I want. And the universe does not deliver our dreams fully realized to us like DoorDash does. You order food and it comes. Now, that's not the way it works. We have to do something too. We're part of the process. We're not just putting our order in and getting it delivered, because although that's what a lot of these philosophies teach, and then people get really frustrated because they've been visualizing and they've been thinking, and they think that there's something wrong with my mind, and then they start feeling guilty. I've done something wrong. I'm not thinking correctly. That thinking and visualizing is part of a process to develop our awareness so that we see what the next step is. And we're in touch with our intuition or perhaps some higher guidance. When I was a college student, my parents told me they couldn't afford to send me to UCLA. So I went to Riverside, which was just a few miles down the road from where they lived, my father was transferred to Norton Air Force Base in Southern California. And I wanted to have the whole college experience. I wanted to live in the dorms. I wanted to be able to meet new people and do new things. And instead, it felt like I was simply back in high school. So I thought, if my parents can't afford to send me to college, I'm going to have to get a job. I had 1 year of commuting. And then that summer, I was working these temporary office jobs and drove my parents' old red Volkswagen down 14th Street in Riverside, past the Press Enterprise office, which was our local newspaper. And this thought filled my mind saying, you're a writer, you should work there. Okay, I made a U-turn, went into the parking lot, walked in the door and said, as a teenager, right? As the shy teenager, hi, I'm Diane Dreher. I'm a writer. I'd like to apply for a job. They said, oh, okay, said one of the reporters, go upstairs to the personnel office. And so I did. And I filled out these forms. And they said, okay, our college intern just gave notice this morning. Can you start work on Monday? Whoa. I was visualizing, I wanted to get a job that would help me pay for college, but I had to do that. And what I got was an intuitive hit that steered me in that direction. No, I personally didn't know that they were in need of hiring another college intern. It was a part-time job. Newspaper offices are open 24/7. I could work it around my class schedule. And guess what? It was just enough money to pay for the dorms, room and board, all my books, my tuition, and everything. And I worked my way through college and I met all these reporters and learned what it means to be a writer. That's both awareness and action.
There you go. That's putting the two together. And there you go. See, I used to say to my girls, they're older now, but I used to say, nothing's going to happen when you're sat on that sofa.
Yeah.
It's to say, look, things happen when you're out talking to people. It might be a random conversation with the person behind the bar of the coffee shop, or it could be somebody hears a conversation, says, oh, yeah, oh, my friend was just saying the other day. And isn't it, this is what people are missing. This is how it happens, all these synchronicities. You put out this thing, but you've got to get out there to put yourself in the position for these. They might have said, oh, no, we don't need anybody, but the office down the road they were just saying, and this is how it happens. Love that. I love hearing things like that. But you, oh man, I'm just a little bit jealous because you sussed it out when you were a lot younger.
Occasionally, I would fall back into I've got to do it all myself. But when we have the awareness, we recognize opportunities that we wouldn't see without that awareness, because we'd be, again, into a very limited mindset, all or nothing. And at that point, I was feeling like I was getting nothing but these little part-time office jobs, temporary part-time office jobs, which were not going to do it. But I was at least out there. If I'd been sitting home on the sofa, I would not have passed the newspaper office and gone in. Okay.
There you go. Yeah. If you were feeling sorry for yourself and poor me and, oh, I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough, but you just went for it. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love
and
it, love it.
We have to go for it. Our egos, which I don't think that a lot of animals have the same kind of ego that we do. I've never seen my dog doing obsessive planning or feeling an inferiority. She's just present right now. But our egos can be very useful. They do help us plan and learn things from experience. But they can also make us feel separate. And we're not separate from the larger reality. The Tao says that everything is energy, and we're part of that energy. And we can tune into it and get guidance from our intuition or from some higher source. But again, to recognize that there's something beyond our ego is really important.
I know my ego, whenever things are not working, it's always, every single time, me that was in my way. Yeah. My ego. Your ego stops you from It's funny because you can, when you can recognize it, and you can step back and you can see what you were doing. I think, oh my goodness, that was silly of me, wasn't it? You can see what was happening. Not that I'm sure it will still happen again. I'm not saying I'm past it all, but like you say, when you're aware, and then, I have to remind myself, I get complacent with stuff and then think, oh, maybe it's time I spent a little bit more time in the mornings on my inner world, actually, to have a bigger effect on the outer world. But you can only know that. You might hear this, so listeners, you can hear Diane sharing this, and it's beautifully explained, but it's only in the doing then you will have your own inner knowing that how true this is. It's only through the experience of it, isn't it? I'd love to get it right every day, all day, every day, but I don't at all. Funnily enough, when I do have that little reminder, come on, Karen, the next day things will just flow so easily. And you think, Karen, just keep going.
Yeah, it's like we're on different channels, and the ego channel cannot bring us inspiration. It brings us a lot of inner critic stuff, telling us what we can't do or what we did wrong last time, and it's trying to protect us from failure. But it also protects us from creativity and success, because it keeps us in a secure place, and we don't grow that way. And nothing in nature is static. Everything is dynamic. It's always growing. It's always evolving. I think that being aware of nature, back to the Tao Te Ching, can really help us transcend our egos and see that we're part of a larger pattern. There's research done at Berkeley by Dacher Keltner on the state of awe that we get into when we're looking at a sunset or up at these tall eucalyptus trees on campus. He had students looking up at the trees or looking up at a big classroom building. And it's no surprise that the students who looked at the trees felt a sense of wonder and awe. And the students who were just looking up at a building said, okay. But what also happened is that they had this little experiment where the experimenter dropped a box of pencils, and the students who'd experienced awe looking at the trees helped pick them up much more than the other students did. Because feeling that we're part of something larger than ourselves, feeling a sense of awe and connection with the wonder and the beauty and grandeur of nature, makes us more altruistic, makes us feel connected to the people around us too. So that we need a connection with nature, which can heal us on many levels and help us overcome being stuck and limited in our awareness.
Because it's all unnecessary.
Yeah.
It's so unnecessary. We don't need to stay stuck. It's all temporary. So how can the listeners use the Tao principle? I still want to say Tao. Got the Tao principles to deal with anxiety and find greater peace of mind.
One way is there are two practices throughout the Tao Te Ching. One is to get back in touch with nature, as we were discussing, because nature can heal us on many levels. Just taking a walk outside has been shown to relieve depression and anxiety in experiments, okay? In fact, there was research done in a Philadelphia hospital years ago where there were patients recovering from abdominal surgery. They had the same surgery, the same doctors, the same hospital food, the same nurses, et cetera, except that some of the patients on one side of the hallway looked out at a view of trees outside their window, and the other patients looked out at brick walls outside their window. Guess what? The patients who had the view of trees suffered from fewer complications, needed less pain medication, and were discharged earlier than the other patients. And the only difference was that they could look out at the window and see trees growing outside. There's something affirmative about being in touch with nature that makes us, that heals us physically and emotionally, for sure, 100%. From anxiety. Yeah.
100%. Just because we can't see it, we can't see the energy coming from there's some stuff going on that we can't see. And so we say it's irrelevant whether it's a brick wall or trees. That just proves that there's frequency, there's energy. It's just, of course, I think most people even logically could think, yeah, that would make sense. It's going to make you feel good. And in the making you feel good, that's going to have a positive effect on your health and well-being.
Yeah, because a lot of our anxiety is because we feel powerless. We feel like we're helpless and hopeless. And somehow feeling connected to this power greater than we are, whether it's the power of nature or in meditation, a sense of being connected to a power greater than we are, that can relieve anxiety. Being connected, the Tao affirms throughout that we're connected. We're not separate little egos feeling helpless and hopeless and thinking we've got to do it all ourselves. Our Western culture emphasizes individualism. And to some degree, that's good. But we don't do anything by ourselves. I haven't made any of my clothes. I do grow a lot of my vegetables, but I didn't make my coffee this morning. I made my coffee, but I didn't grow the coffee beans. I'm connected to all the people and all the nature that created these gifts for me to enjoy every day and to sustain me. And I hope that what I give out reaches other people because we are all connected. And when we're connected, we don't feel helpless. We've got support. We're part of a supportive community of nature, of other people, of spirit, of energy, which is what we are.
And so why there are so many people that are feeling lonely and isolated and stressed. So actually the Tao would help deal with all these issues if they were to maybe just question it, look into it.
Yeah. And again, combine awareness with positive action. The Tao says the Tao person creates harmony, reaching out from the heart to build community. And one of the things that's happened, as you just said, is that we have an epidemic of loneliness in our world. And loneliness is very bad for our health. It's apparently, according to one study, worse than smoking 2 packs a day because it lowers our immune system and it increases inflammation. It does all kinds of bad things for us. Okay. Makes us feel anxious, makes us feel helpless. High blood pressure, poor sleep quality, eating disorders, metabolic syndrome, depression, all of this comes from social isolation and loneliness. So what can we do? We, again, as the Tao says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We can take one step out to connect, whether it's taking a walk in our neighborhood and waving at a neighbor. What does that do? Apparently nothing tangible that we can see. But a psychologist named Barbara Fredrickson in North Carolina has done research on what she calls micro moments of connectivity, which waving at a neighbor, saying a kind word, or just smiling at the clerk at the grocery store, these little connections can actually activate our immune system, decrease inflammation, and make us healthier and emotionally happier. Just one little connection like that. And we need those connections with our community, as well as connections with our loved ones who are closer to us. And to write somebody a thank you note. There's studies, again, at UC Davis about the importance of gratitude, to thank someone.
100%.
Yeah, which again makes the person who gets the thank you note feel good, but it makes the person who is expressing the gratitude feel good. And there's even a gratitude practice that if we write down 3 things we're grateful for each day, that makes us healthier, happier, and more successful because we feel that we're connected to support, emotional, spiritual support from the people we care about. So we can do some little things. And again, one little step leads to another. we need to rebuild community because over COVID, we've lost a lot of it.
Oh, yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And all these tips, guess what? They're free. They don't cost a penny. So, what about the Dow principles with regards to resolving personal conflicts?
Okay, yin and yang, both and. When people get into conflict, very often they get stressed because it's not fun to be in conflict. And it's not a situation that really leads to peace of mind. So we're stressed. And when we're stressed, we tend to see things as, guess what? All or nothing, either or, win or lose. I had another experience when I was in college, which is an excellent example that I write about in my book. I changed the names of some of the people because I don't want to embarrass them. But at any rate, I was a junior in college, working my way through college at the newspaper office, just so excited. And I wanted to go to grad school, and I loved learning. And also, the first great love of my life, my boyfriend in college, was a senior, and he was graduating. It was spring, I think it was May, and we were standing outside under the stars, and on a romantic evening, he proposed to me. And of course, I said yes. And his next statement was, "Good. Now we've gotten that resolved. You'll drop out of school and work so that I can go to grad school." And I said, "Why can't we both go to grad school?" And he looked at me and said, "You're being selfish." And he broke up with me. So I got one night, a proposal and a breakup. This was shocking. And he didn't understand that there are other ways. It doesn't necessarily mean that the woman needs to work so that the man can go to grad school. We could have gotten graduate fellowships. We could have gotten jobs. He could have worked for a year and saved his money, and we could have gone to grad school at the same time. But he couldn't see anything other than it's either this, all or nothing. So we got nothing. That was the end of our relationship.
Crazy.
Yeah, because again, there are other possibilities. I have this little story that I tell about in my workshops about a group of people going up to a cabin in the mountain for a weekend retreat. And they stop at the bottom of the mountain at a grocery store to get all the food they're going to need. And then people have brought their favorite recipes. Okay, and they get up to the cabin and they're making dinner that night. And one person is going to be making lemon chicken, and another person is going to be making lemon poppy seed cake for dessert. And they realize there's only one lemon, and they both need a lemon for their recipe. So what do? We can have an all or nothing, either or, win or lose. They can fight over the lemon, and one person has the lemon in the recipe and it's good, and the other person's recipe falls flat because it doesn't have that lemon. Or they can cut the lemon in half and compromise, which is what a lot of people do in conflict. And so either they each have half a lemon and their recipes are half as good as they would have been, or else they can say, "What do you need?" and listen to each other. And it so happens that the person who is making the cake needs the lemon zest, which is the skin of the lemon scraped off. And the person who's making the lemon chicken needs the lemon juice. So they look at each other. One person scrapes off the skin of the lemon, hands the lemon to the other person, and they both win. Because a lot of the time, it's not either or, it's not half compromise. It's listening to each other and finding out, what do you really need? And maybe what they need is a different part of the lemon, and they can both benefit. So conflict resolution, both and, to do something that relieves our stress, which I usually take a deep breath into my center. And sometimes I need to take 3 deep breaths because it's very stressful. That cuts the stress reaction. Then we can think more clearly and listen to the other person and tell the other person, what I need, this is what you need. How can we make this happen together? And very often there is a both and solution.
A win-win. They look for the win-win. So lovely speaking to you today, Diane. So what would you like the listeners to really take away from this Tao of Inner Peace?
Oh my gosh. To be able to recognize that we have an incredible capacity for creativity within us, and to connect with the inspiration of nature, the wisdom of the Tao, the resources that we have within and around us. And when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling confused, to realize, okay, what can I do to get centered, and to ask, what's the next step? To combine awareness and action and realize that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And as we each take that step, we can all move forward toward a better world together.
Oh man, that's beautiful. That's got to be the author in you. Oh my goodness. Yeah, there you go. And we complicate things. So look, for the listeners, if they can't see your information down here, what is it that you're really doing? I know you're an author, but you're a positive psychology, I can't even say it, positive psychology coach as well. What is it that you are looking for? Are you looking for to help certain people? What is it that you need?
Okay, what I do as a coach and as an author is follow my calling, which is to help other people find the power within them, their own calling. And I use positive psychology research. There's a viacharacter.org free survey that people can take that shows what their top character strengths are. And research has shown that when we use our strengths, guess what? We're healthier, happier, and more successful than we're going against the grain. That's part of nature. And so I do that in my writing, in my workshops, in my coaching, because it's exciting to help share the light on many levels.
Brilliant. So how do they get in touch? So if they can't see your website, how do they get hold of you, Diane?
Okay, my website's pretty easy to find. It's www.dianedreher.com, DianeDreher, again. And I also have Your Personal Renaissance, my blog for Psychology Today, which has a lot of stories about how to maximize our human creativity in this life. And I welcome people to come to my website. There's a contact link. They can sign up for my newsletter at dianedreher.com, and they can communicate with me. They can send me an email on the contact link there too.
Fantastic. There you go. I learned a lot. I've heard of Lao Tzu. I best look into that book. It's obviously a lot of the things we have learned over the years have come from that book. A lot of the sort of, because Lao Tzu, heard many a different quote from Lao Tzu, but I didn't realize it was from this book. So there you go. I've learned a lot. I hope the listeners have learned a lot. And thank you so much for your time today, Diane.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And you are living the Tao, Karen.
Oh, bless you. Bless you. Thank you so much. And to the listeners, well, I will be back on Thursday with a Coffee with Karen. Bye for now.
Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical, and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity